I'm Kenny Smith from KennySmithGuitar.com, and got a good friend with me today, Mark Demaray, and he's going to tell us all about the Lakeside guitars. And it's one of the rare guitars that I've ever seen. And for a long time, I just saw pictures. I heard about the guitar. This particular one's the Lakeside Jumbo, and I'll let Mark tell us a little bit more about this rare guitar.
Yeah, Kenny, the Line and Healy company was touted itself as the biggest musical instrument distributor in the world. Was really very active in the late 1800s into the past the turn of the century, and they had many different lines of guitars and brands and whatnot. One of the lines they had was the Lakeside line, and it was very common. That was really in the days when parlor guitars were very common, as were the mandolin orchestras. And so they sold just a ton of them. Kenny has one of the Lakeside parlor guitars. It's a really nice tiger oak sides and back. It's really cool little guitar. And there's a lot of those Lakesides around that kind of fit that size with the parlor guitar. But particularly in the 1910s, 1915 range, the mandolin orchestras were just very popular. Almost every city had one. And with all those mandolins and mandolas and mandocellos, the guitars were kind of getting drowned out when they were this size. So there was a need to develop a larger body guitar with a little more volume. And so the first catalog of notation of a large body steel string guitar, really we think the first cataloged and production steel string guitar was this one, which they called the Lakeside Jumbo. So it was similar features in many ways to the parlors, but they made it this size, which is really much more, even today it's really almost what we would call a slope shoulder dreadnought size. It's a very deep body guitar, even deeper than many of the dreads nowadays, and 12 frets, as most of the guitars were. The 14th fret really came out later when Martin popularized it in the 30s, even after the banjo craze died out. But in these early days, 12 fret guitars, bigger body, steel strings to get a little more volume, really to help with the rhythm and such in the mandolin orchestras was their primary focus. Now again, the first catalog mention in the Line and Healy catalogs was 1912 or so. This particular one was potentially even a prototype because the serial number stamped in it puts it in the 1909 range. Now, Martin takes credit, rightfully so, for really inventing the dreadnought, but their first dreadnought they just celebrated a few years ago, 100 years. 1916 was their first dreadnought, which it's more of a slope shoulder 12 fret as well, a different size than this.
Right. Yeah.
And this basic body size and shape really carried on even to the 30s with the Washburn line, which was part of the Line and Healy in the early days as well.
Yeah, I love the Line and Healy stuff, especially the just the way the necks are. They have like many guitars of this era, they have a real nice V on the back of the neck, and it kind of, I don't know, for me, I just love the way that feels. With that, it's pretty pronounced V right there, but it just feels different in your hand. And even this guitar is pretty, it has a little bit smaller neck on it, but it still has that typical of this era with the V, and deeper starts getting kind of deep right here around the fifth fret, but kind of maintains that all the way to the heel.
Another interesting thing about these is I'm not really sure why they did it, but in those days, the turn of the century, they had artisans who were great grain painters, so they would paint wood to look like a certain species of wood using a less expensive brand. So it turns out these Lakeside Jumbos are actually made of birch, we think. But if you look at the grain, Kenny will do a close-up of this in the end, it looks for all the world like Brazilian rosewood. You look up really close and you have to really get your eye close to see that it's actually painted on grain. made to look like a rosewood species. When you look inside the sound hole, you can see it's just a plain wood in there. So you would not know that by looking at the guitar on the outside. It seems like it would have been easier just to use rosewood.
Yeah.
But they seem to want to grain paint it and spend.
It really looks beautiful. I mean, it's got it's a beautiful color.
Yeah. And it stayed with it most of these years. It still looks pretty good. I mean, it's the finish is worn down a bit, but this one's all original. We had to put a bridge on this one because the old bridge was cracked. But other than that, it's all original parts and pieces.
Now, you'd been looking for one of these for a while.
I had, because it was in the catalog and written about in some of the early Washburn books as perhaps the first dreadnought made. And again, this one was made 7-8 years before Martin cataloged theirs and took credit for that. But this one, popped up in an auction one time, and most people don't know what it is if you don't know what you're looking for. Yeah. And it actually it's stamped inside that it's the Lakeside. So this one was pretty easily recognizable as such. So I picked this one up and was pretty happy to find it. It was really the first time we'd seen a harp guitar with the same body shape. Another guy that's a Washburn fan that I know has the double-necked harp guitar with the same body shape in the same basic era. So we knew generally what they looked like, but we hadn't really gotten one to measure the body depth and all of those things.
Like that.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
I know the first time I saw this guitar, I guess we was at a festival here in Washington State, and Mark showed me this guitar, and I played it that night in a jam, and man, it was unreal. It really projects and the rhythm, everything you want in a guitar. Like just it would stand up to any Martin or dreadnought size body, and this one is ladder braced, and it's amazing how well this thing projects, like in a group. I think we had about, I'd say probably 6 or 10 people in the jam, and this thing just really it didn't take a back seat to anything. It's really this guitar projects, and I was really blown away at the guitar. I mean, and the tone of it.
We usually don't think of that so much with ladder brace guitars. They were generally, in the 30s, the ladder brace were generally the cheaper guitars, but they were cheaper all the way through with the other materials and stuff. So with a good piece of Eastern or red spruce, as we know today, tops, and really good parts in there, it sounds really good, even with the ladder bracing in there. It's a little fragile, compared to what we know today. They were just learning how to build them and keep them going with steel strings, but it's survived pretty well. The top's still pretty flat, and it's still, as Kenny said, it's a pretty good sounding guitar for being 1909. Really, we don't think of it so much in those early days as being much of a good sounding guitar.
They went from this is your kind of parlor sound. That went from that, and then to this, which is, you'll see. So that's a pretty big difference. I mean, as far as
it's just a huge sounding guitar to me, and plus with the 12th fret, it still has the kind of what we would consider the Martin scale today, 25 and 3/8 or thereabouts, and it's so with the 12th fret, that means the bridge is lower set down in the body, and it gives a little more open sound, I think. For many 12th fret dreads are like that.
Of course, we know that the Martin or the Ditson style, they just had the scale, but they just took the sides and went up to the 12th fret. Whereas this one's, if you think of like just a regular dreadnought body and push the bridge back that much, that's what's going on here.
Yeah.
Which is Regal Mark turned me on to the 12 fret Regals, and they did the same thing. They used the same body size, and then just put a 12 fret neck on it, and then push the bridge back, rather than taking the sides and going this way up to the 12th fret like you normally see. But it really, to me, it opens up the voicing of the guitar. You got a little extra, especially in, going back to the bridge there a little bit. It's of course up around sound. So to me, it's just got I don't know, it's somewhere in between a mahogany guitar and say maybe a rosewood sound. It's kind of in between. You got that mahogany sound on the kind of on the leads, but for rhythm I hear the kind of that rosewood sound, which has got a great color, I think, to the both things. And I don't know, one thing I've found about just what little I played this guitar is it's got a real this third string and fourth string has a real round quality about it, but it cuts. It's got that same kind of what you'd expect, in a maybe a mahogany, bigger guitar. But it's definitely one of the most rare guitars that I've ever played and seen. I was just blown away. I didn't even know what it was, and Mark at the jam just put it in my lap and said, "Hey, try this." And I couldn't believe it. Man, it sounded so rich, and the tone just seemed just the palette from like the sound hole back, moving back towards the bridge. You've got a lot of a lot of variance in what you can do with this style guitar. And I don't think it sounds like I've played a lot of guitar. I don't think it sounds like anything that I've owned. I mean, they kind of had their own little thing there.
Well, and they were just learning. I mean, they were learning how to build a body that big, learning to put steel strings on it, which was a lot tougher on everything. We don't really know what's in the neck. I've not had the fretboard off to see if there's a rod in there or anything, but it might be an ebony rod or something like that to hold it. But the neck relief has held up pretty good since 1909, and not that many to compare it to, really. Again, we think that might be even the first one just because of the early serial number on it. So,
what do you think the neck? What do you think they use for the neck?
It could be. It might even be poplar again. I mean,
Poplar
it looks
again,
like it. They use that pretty commonly. I mean,
Kind
this one was mahogany, the little parlor one, so they definitely had that wood, and they could have used the same neck, but that one doesn't seem to be. I think it looks like a poplar neck.
It's pretty light colored on here, and I don't know. It's definitely, this guitar doesn't hardly weigh anything.
Yeah, it's very lightweight. Yeah,
it's a lightweight on it, and typical square bridge for that period. That was kind of the style then. And it's real pretty right here where the radius is, and of course it's got the pyramid kind of style ends on it. But I would say that's getting less. I'd say it's probably 7/8. Maybe.
Yeah, I think it is. It's under an inch for sure. The width of it. I think the Gibsons in the 30s were an inch, a full inch, really, maybe even a little more on some of them. And this one's narrower than that. So, again, they were just learning what to do and didn't necessarily have it figured out what the string tension might do. And that may be one of the reasons there's not that many around. We don't know how many they made, but, with strung up with steel strings as they got heavier into the 20s and 30s, the string gauge could have just, damaged many of them beyond repair. So there just hasn't been many of them that have shown up.
If you hadn't found one of them was hard enough to do, I see you got another one here.
Yeah,
Tell us about
the
second one.
It's a great story because I finally found this one, and so knew what they looked like and some of the trim and the features and marquetry and that kind of thing. I have a cousin that lived in London for many years, and he had lived in Seattle about 25 years ago and picked up an old guitar and didn't have any labels on it, didn't know what it was, and it had been, since he moved to Europe, he left it sitting under his mother's bed in Michigan. And every time we get together, every 5 or 6 years, he'd say, I got this old guitar under the bed at my mom's house. I don't know what it is, but I want you to help me figure out what it is. I know you have all these old guitars and you've researched them and whatnot. So I said, well, send me a picture, and he never did. So finally, he was out about 3 years ago and went to his mom's on the way back to Europe, and he sent me a couple of pictures, and I kind of fell out of my chair because it was this guitar, which is yet another Lakeside Jumbo. Now, it's slightly different. There's a little bit different marquetry, and there's no stamps, there's no labels. It doesn't say Lakeside or anything on it, but clearly they're identical guitars, and it's really pretty amazing. This one even has the original bridge. It has the same grain painting on the back, and in fact, you can see where it's been played over the years, some of the paint came off, and you can see the beautiful birch shining through there. But other than that, the same V-neck, tuners, everything. So clearly, the second known Lakeside Jumbo. Now this one has, interesting enough, the body is a little less deep, by about 1/4 inch. That has a really deep body, and this one is more what we would see today. This one, there's no stamps or numbers on it again, so we think it's probably more like 1912, 1915. They did make guitar. They were in the business of selling guitars, so they would make them and sell them to a music store to sell. Fred's music store would want to have Fred inlaid on the top. Right. They would do any of those little custom things. So this could very well have been just a paper label that's come off that was for some music store that they made, but it still sounds pretty good. I think the original one probably sounds a little better to my ear, but it's still pretty good sounding guitar. And
the neck is really similar. You can tell that they both look almost identical. The way they shape the back here, and
that they're very similar with the V-neck and everything. Where the volute would be on a Martin is the same, and little ebony cap there, and the same painting. You can tell it was the same artist that did the grain painting, so it could be that
that one has a little different back stripe, I think.
It does, yeah. There's a different back stripe on this one is more of like a half herringbone, and this is kind of a square design, But otherwise, and if this had not been found after we knew what to look for, I probably I could have missed it and not known what it was. So it was pretty. Sometimes they find you. This one found me. Yeah.
It's an amazing story.
Yep. But pretty interesting old guitars. That's for sure.
Thanks, Mark, for saving these 2 guitars. I know everybody. I know I really enjoy learning about, especially this. The stuff that you don't see every day, and these are 2 guitars you do not see every day, and I just appreciate you taking the time and letting us see these and sharing what great instruments they made back then, and it's a piece of history, especially with the way things went after that, the guitar design, and it's just it's a great stepping stone, I think.
And I think it had to be some influence on even Martin's design. The story goes with Martin that Harry Hunt, representative of the Ditson Company, walked into their factory in 1916 and said, make me a dreadnought, effectively, to Dykeman and Mr. Martin. And and Ditson was a Line and Healy dealer, so they probably had some of these come through their store, and he wanted, some influence of this model. Almost certainly, was paid some attention to in the Martin factory. So, anyway, interesting story. For sure. Yeah.
I'll play a song on one of these, and let you hear up close and personal there. And thanks again, Mark, for
Thanks
telling
for
us all
coming,
about
Kenny.
it. Yeah, thank you.